Da-na-na-na. Breaking news. Is it just as easy to immigrate into the United States as it was for our ancestors? Reporters Alison Andrews, Jeffrey Marcellus, and Kelly O'Brien are here to debunk that myth and bring you the facts. Many Americans have a specific idea of immigration. One idea that many Americans share is that immigrating to the United States in the present is just as easy as it was in the past. We will be showing you how this is a myth by investigating Mexico, Cuba, and Haiti, and what it's like to immigrate from those countries. Immigration rates and naturalization from Mexico into the U.S. Becoming naturalized has become harder over the years. You used to be able to just go to Ellis Island and you could automatically become a citizen. Now you have to take a test that has a lot of difficult factors, such as learning another language. If you're from another country, this is a lot harder than it sounds. The immigration rate is lower for Mexicans than immigrants of other origins because of the quota system. The quota system was introduced in 1921. It limits the number of immigrants allowed into the U.S. each year based off of nationality.
I crossed the border in 1885. Who even knew where the border was in those days? There were no signs, no border patrol. And it did not matter so much where you came from or how you got there, as long as you were willing to work. That is all I had when I got there, the will to work.
Policy change for a Cuban immigrant. Some people believe that it is just as easy to immigrate to the United States now as it was in the past. I'm going to debunk this myth using policy change to look at the island of Cuba. Cuba is an island located just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. This is why places such as Miami are so heavily populated by Cubans. Cuba is very vintage in the cars and technology spotted around the island. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered this island, and since then, the people have never been completely free. This caused the island to fall apart economically and politically. There were 4 distinct waves of Cuban immigration. The first, when Castro took over. The second, when the U.S. and Cuban governments opened the borders to Cubans with families already living in the U.S. The third, when a violent bus crash took place. And the fourth, when the failing economy caused riots. Many people consider the present to be an immigration wave as well. In the past, there were 3 distinct policies that affected the people of Cuba. The 1965 Heller-Seller Act, signed by Lyndon Johnson, caused the elimination of quotas that favored European immigrants. All throughout the 60s and 70s, Cubans were let into the United States at much higher rates because of the Cold War. Then, in 1995, the Clinton administration signed an act that made it so Cubans couldn't be considered political refugees, which made it harder for them to get green cards and visas. In the last year, there has been a 78% increase in Cubans immigrating to the U.S. Cubans have also been given back their privilege to be seen as fleeing from political persecution. The graphs shows the fluctuation of Cubans immigrating through the years 2013-2015 by quarters. As you can see, the numbers gradually rise in 2014 and continue to rise into the first quarter of 2015. You might think that now that Cubans are being seen as fleeing from political persecution, that obtaining visas would be easy for them. This is incorrect. The number of Cubans considered illegal was recorded as being double than the number recorded as being legal immigrants in the 2015 legal fiscal year. The Coast Guard also reported picking up 4,500 undocumented Cubans at sea. The graph shows the number of unauthorized Cubans entering the United States from 2005 to 2015. It's obvious that there is a very major difference between the number of undocumented immigrants in 2014 and 2015. Not only is gaining a visa hard, but the journey to America is also extremely difficult for Cubans. It was reported by the Coast Guard that there has been a huge increase in the number of Cubans traveling by raft or boat. Many have also been reported to be trekking through Latin America to reach the United States. Ecuador just recently closed its gates to Cubans without visas, but before then, they were able to travel through Ecuador to get to the United States. The closing of Ecuador has made it extremely more difficult for Cubans to get to the United States now.
We are debunking the myth that it is easier to come in now in the U.S. than it was before. I am using Haitian immigration in the U.S. to prove why this myth is invalid. In 2010, the immigration population was 40 million people, and 12.9% of the total U.S. population consisted of foreign-born immigrants. compared to 1970, where 4.7 of all U.S. residents were foreign-born immigrants. In 1980, only 14.1 million immigrants populated the U.S., showing that there is way more immigrants that populate the U.S. now than there was before. A chart like this is what leads people to the assumption that it is easier for immigrants to come in now than before, since there are way more immigrants populating the U.S., but that in fact is not true. I'll be debunking this by using Haitian immigration, but even the Haitian immigration chart may show the same conclusion to these myth believers, because Haitian immigrants populated between 1980 to 2000 more than quadrupled from 92,000 to 419,000 immigrants, and from 2010 to 2012, the population of foreign-born immigrants increased to 606,000 immigrants. This chart can be used the same as a total immigrant population, because in 1980, 92,000 populated, and now 606,000 populated in 2012, which shows a dramatic increase, which may lead to the conclusion that it's easier to come to the U.S., but that's not true. In the U.S. Haitian population chart, it shows two dramatic increase of Haitian population between 1980 to 2000 and 2010 to 2012. And those two time periods was where Haiti was suffering the most through humanitarian crisis. First crisis between 1980 and 2000 was when Jean-Claude Duvalier died. He was known for killing thousands of Haitians and torturing them, causing hundreds of thousands to flee the country during this time. This caused so many Haitian immigrants to come to the U.S. for protection, and the U.S. immigration law allows foreigners to come to the country if it's because of a humanitarian crisis, which is what was happening in Haiti between that time. The second wave in 2010-2012 was due to the 7.0 magnitude scale earthquake, killing approximately 220,000, injuring 300,000 Haitians. 4,000 schools were damaged or destroyed. Over 188,383 houses were badly damaged, with 105,000 completely destroyed, leaving 1.5 million Haitians homeless. The U.S. gave Haiti a great helping hand by allowing many of these homeless Haitians to come into the U.S. with permanent residency due to the destruction of the country, which would show why the population of Haitian immigrants in the U.S. had greatly increased, not because it was easier to get into the U.S., but because of the humanitarian crisis that was killing Haiti at that point, which forced the U.S. to allow them in because they had no other choice but to. All in all, the chart in and of itself means one thing. It shows how many Haitian immigrants or how many immigrants are populating the U.S. What that chart doesn't show is why or how they came into the U.S. Therefore, the assumption that it's easier to come to the U.S. now than before cannot be seen just by looking at this graph alone, because the only reason why there was such a huge flood of immigrants through those times was because of the two waves of destruction that happened in Haiti, whether it was their government collapse or the earthquake, which struck them really hard, causing not only the government but buildings and schools and their surroundings to collapse, giving them nowhere to go or nowhere to stay, leaving the U.S. the only option but to let them in. Therefore, the myth that it is easier to come into the country now than before is invalid.
These are our credits and some sources from where we got our articles. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and that you think of immigration a lot differently than you did before seeing this.